Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in either on Facebook Live or after on our podcast or YouTube. I'm Emma Goldblatt, and I'm the program manager here at Shamayim, and we're so happy to introduce you to Kate Brindle, who is a senior public policy specialist for farm animal protection at the Humane Society of the United States, where she works on legislative campaigns across the country. Kate and her teammates lead campaigns to prohibit the cage confinement of chickens, pigs, and calves. She's helped pass laws banning confinement in Colorado, Nevada, and Utah. She also serves as a board member of Attorneys for Animals and is the chair of the Animal Law section of the State Bar of Michigan. Kate's a graduate of New York University and Michigan State University College of Law, where she served as an associate editor of the Journal for Animal and Natural Resource Law and president of the Student Animal Legal Defense Fund. She's been featured in Food Dive and on CNBC. So with that, welcome, Kate, and we're so glad to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, we're so happy to have you. The first thing I wanted to know about you is what inspired your journey towards being an animal advocate?
So my journey, I've always, even when I was a child, I loved companion animals like dogs and cats. And so I was lucky enough to grow up with a family dog named Lucky, who we adopted from a local humane society where I grew up. And I remember when I was 13 years old, I was walking him with my mom in this little strip mall area. And there were these people sitting at a table and they were handing out leaflets and they said, "Have you ever thought about being a vegetarian?" And I said, "No," because I hadn't. And I remember they said something that really got me. And they said, "Well, you would never want your dog to suffer or feel pain, right?" And of course, I said yes. And so they handed me a leaflet and said, "Well, why don't you take this? It's got a little bit more information about how farm animals like cows and pigs and chickens, how they suffer and how they feel pain and how they have the ability to do both of those things, just like our dogs and cats." And so I took the leaflet somewhat reluctantly, and I read it, and I was fascinated about what was going on. And so one of the books that it recommended to read for kind of additional reading was Diet for a New America by John Robbins. And I read it and it completely changed my life because I had no idea what was going on factory farms. I had no idea the way that farm animals were being treated. And as soon as I learned about that, I realized it wasn't something I could support. And I thought it was something, it was so cruel and awful that I wanted to work to end it. So that's how I originally got involved when I was in middle school.
Awesome, that's great. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization you work for and how, if any way, we could get involved?
Absolutely. So I work for the Humane Society of the United States, and we were founded in 1954. And since then, we've been taking on the biggest fights for animals across the country. And like our name says, our mission is to create a more humane society. So we fight for all animals, not just dogs and cats, but we take on the biggest threats to all animals, great and small. And I work on HSUS's Farm Animal Protection Campaign, where our goal is to reduce the suffering of animals raised for meat, eggs, and dairy. And so to kind of back up a little bit, and just to kind of paint the picture before I get into some of the specifics of our work, the majority of egg-laying hens, mother pigs used for pork, or used in the pork industry, I should say, and calves used in the veal industry are confined in cages so small that they're virtually immobilized. So egg-laying hens are locked in cages where they can't even spread their wings. Each bird is given less amount of space than the dimensions of an iPad on which to live her entire life. Mother pigs are confined in gestation crates, which are metal bar cages that are virtually no bigger than the pig's own bodies. And these crates are so small, the mother pigs can't even turn around. And so they're forced to eat, sleep, defecate all in the same small space. And then calves used in the veal industry, they're confined in similar ways in veal crates. And so what we do is we're waging and winning legislative and corporate campaigns to abolish these cruel practices. So we're working in states across the country to outlaw this sort of confinement. And we're also working with over 200 of the country's biggest corporations to end these cages in their supply chains. And at the same time, we want to promote healthy, kind eating and eating humanely. And so because more plant-based meals means eating fewer animals, which means dramatically reducing the amount of suffering in the world. So our focus is on dining services and food service companies. So basically companies that provide a lot of meals. So companies that supply cafeterias in K through 12 schools, colleges, universities, military bases, hospitals, even prisons. And so what we're doing is we're working with them to put more plant-based meals on their menus. And so we actually employ chefs and registered dietitians and specialists in the art of menu development. A lot of times I think when people hear the Humane Society, they think of dogs and cats. But we actually employ chefs as well. And so these folks, they work across the US, building relationships with the largest food service companies in the country. And then they create these plant-based menu concepts. And they also lead in-person and virtual trainings to train the chefs on these menus and how to prepare plant-based items and how to label and market them as well. And so we do have ways that folks could get involved. Should I go ahead and share those?
Oh yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, we certainly couldn't do the work that we do without our incredible volunteers, and there's so many ways to get involved with HSUS if people are interested. So the first is that if you want to go to our website, humanesociety.org, you can sign up for action alerts. And so if there's an issue impacting animals in your community, you'll get updates and you'll get information about how you can get involved and actions you can take. We also have kind of a hub where people can look at different volunteer opportunities we have. And so that web address is humanesociety.org/volunteer. And then we also have, I think, a pretty unique volunteer program called our Humane Policy Volunteer Leader Program. And it's a little more involved, and it's a really unique opportunity to engage in federal, state, and local legislative advocacy. And then our humane policy volunteer leaders also help mobilize and lead others to take action as well. And there's an opportunity to work on local animal protection projects as well. So no matter what kind of time folks have to give and to get involved, I mean, we're so appreciative of any amount of time people have.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. I will make sure to put those links wherever this video is so people can easily um, find it and everything.
Oh,
So
thank you.
yeah, when you were talking about, hiring like chefs to make plant-based meals for like schools and things like that, it reminded me that when I was in college, I was vegetarian at the time. And I considered not being vegetarian anymore because there was just nothing I could eat. Like it was really crazy. So I mean, hopefully it's better now, but I don't know.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. I had the same issue when I was in college, but I mean, things are definitely changing, because like I said, we're working with the biggest food service companies in the country. So we actually we've been in partnership for several years with Sodexo, which is the world's second largest food service company. And it was just last week that they actually released that their goal is to go 50% plant-based in their campus segment. So basically in all of their campus accounts, so, like college and university accounts, they will be 50% plant-based. So there will definitely be options. I think there's more and more options every day. And not just for people who eat plant-based, but research shows that the more plant-based options you put on a menu, the more people will try them, despite what their diet might be. So we think that's really important.
Awesome. Yes, definitely. So the last thing I wanted to ask you was, what changes do you think are the most critical right now, and how can we inspire people to move towards that?
So I think one of the ways just generally we can inspire people is to make them aware and to let them know what's truly going on in industrial animal agriculture. these practices of confining animals in cages so small they can barely move and then just denying them nearly everything that's natural to them, they're hidden. And so I think a lot of people, they just don't know what's truly going on. So I think doing our best to let people know, that's really key. And I think one of the most critical changes we're working on right now and that we can make is to work to abolish cages and crates for farm animals. A recent poll by Data for Progress showed that 80% of Americans are in favor of laws that would ban this sort of extreme confinement. And that's true across political parties too. So that figure, it's pretty equal among Democrats and Republicans. And we're seeing progress, which is wonderful. We're making progress. HSUS and our allies, we've fought hard to ban the extreme confinement of farm animals. We're continuing to fight, and we've passed confinement bans in 14 states. Just last year, we led the campaign to ban cages for egg-laying hens in Arizona. And because of victories like that, we are seeing change. So the USDA, which tracks cage-free in the egg industry, so when HSUS and our allies started these campaigns to move the egg industry away from crates, or I'm sorry, away from cages, roughly 5% of the egg industry in the United States was cage-free, and that's a decade ago. And now that number is 38%, and that's a record high since cages became the norm. So just in terms of numbers, that translates to over 100 million hens each year who will never have to suffer in a cage. And that's equivalent to the human populations of California, Texas, and Florida combined, which I think is incredible. But that means that 62% of the egg industry still uses cages. So it's critical to keep up the fight until all confinement is eradicated. And at the same time that we're working on a policy and corporate level to end cages, it's easy to make small changes in our diet. And so that's another thing we have on our website is we've got hundreds of delicious and nutritious plant-based recipes. So I encourage viewers to try those. And kind of like what we were talking about before, there's never been so many plant-based products on the market than there is right now. Even most fast food companies have plant-based options, and it wasn't always that way. So I really think that there's things, even little things and even little choices that we make in our daily lives can really have huge impacts when it comes to animals.
Yes, absolutely. Um, Going back to the egg thing, is there like certain verbiage or like stuff we should look for on egg cartons of people who eat eggs to know that it's truly like cage free? Because I know there's sometimes different terms they can use. Do you know about that?
Yeah, it's tough, and certainly terminology can be a little bit confusing because you've got cage free, free range, pasture raised. And so cage free is by no means utopia for these birds. I mean, it's certainly better, and that's why we advocate for it, because under the current system with cages, birds can't even spread their wings. That's
Mm.
how tightly confined they are. So with cage free, it means that they would be able to spread their wings. They wouldn't be in a cage their entire lives. And then also the types of laws and policies that we advocate for also have enrichments. So it means that birds would be able to engage in some of their natural behaviors like perching and dust bathing and laying eggs in a nest. But
Mm.
with cage free, that doesn't mean access to the outdoors. So these birds, they still will be indoors their whole lives. So I would recommend looking for if folks are eating eggs, definitely look for higher welfare labels, like cage free, and also pasture raised. That means that the birds are actually able to go outside. So I would take a look at those labels. But yeah, certainly they can be confusing about what the actual standards mean.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for coming on and talking about what it is you do and your journey. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that.
All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day.